Hello, everyone, and a huge thank you for joining us today for our discussion about what is developer self service and does your org need it? This is a lead dev webinar created in partnership with Spacelift. This webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and the panelists will head over to the lead dev Slack to answer some of your questions in the technical strategy channel. We may also have time to answer a couple of questions live, so please do submit those through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and we'll get to them if we can towards the end. So let's get started with some introductions. My name is Jasmine James, and today I'll be joined by Gal Bashan, Jean-Marc Fontaine, and Ashish Nanda to share their experience and insights. I'll ask each of you to please introduce yourself. Gal, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gal, and I've been the head of engineering for Epsagon for the last 7 years, something like that. Epsagon has been acquired 3 years ago by Cisco. And in the recent year, in the last year, I've transitioned more into a role where I coordinate different groups with the platform group. So I'm really passionate about the subject and really looking forward for our discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Gal. Jean-Marc?
Hey, my name is Jean-Marc Fontaine. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer at Spacelift. I joined the company about 2 years and a half ago. And before moving to product management, I spent about 2 decades working on DevOps platforms, doing CI/CD, infrastructure as code, and cloud operations, a lot of that. So I was basically on the other side of the fence.
Awesome. Thank you. And finally, Ashish.
Yeah, hey, so I'm an engineering manager at Netflix. I lead some full stack engineering teams focused on developer productivity and observability. Before joining Netflix, I was at AWS, leading teams that are building developer tools and services with the goal of simplifying and accelerating application development with the cloud. Excited to be here on the panel today.
Awesome. Thank you all for the intros. All right, so let's frame the conversation. As we all know, in modern DevOps culture, terms like self-serve, shifting left, and internal developer portals have become synonymous with efficiency and innovation. And the core idea behind these concepts is to empower developers by providing them with all the tools they need to design and build great software, all while avoiding the usual delays and bottlenecks that can slow down progress. However, implementing self-service workflows is far from straightforward. I believe we all can attest to that. It's not enough to simply build a tool and expect your teams to adopt it immediately. The success of this approach relies on multiple factors, both before and after the rollout, from understanding the unique needs of your developers to ensuring seamless integration and ongoing support. There are many layers to consider. So today we'll be talking with our panelists about their experience in implementing these developer portals, IDPs, and shifting left. The first question that I have is, can you all briefly describe what developer self-service means in the context of your organization? And Gal, I'd like to start with you, given your unique and diverse experience both with the startup and now being at Cisco.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, right? Because every organization has to look at it differently. When I look back on our days at Epsagon, where we had like 10 developers, there was no really need for a platform team or self-serve because we were one team and everyone did everything and everyone inherently self-served, right? Because it was the things that we all built. Um, Fast forward 4 years later, we're entering into Cisco, which is a gigantic beast, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of teams to integrate with, and this becomes a real challenge. So we actually saw a lot of phases of that within Cisco. At the beginning, self-serve looked like a lot of manuals that people could follow and a lot of examples that they could copy. As time progressed, we understood that this is not enough, and we had to actually offer um, what people now refer to as self-serve capabilities are portals or a way to easily access those resources when you need them and easily set them up. But it really, really varies on where you are in your journey as a company.
Absolutely. Really agree with that. Over to you, Jean-Marc. With your experience at Spacelift, what does developer self-service mean in the context of that organization?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my perspective is a bit different because we are a vendor in that in that area. We are a SaaS tool to provision, configure, and govern your infrastructure. We manage infrastructure as code tools such as Terraform, OpenTofu, and others, but also configuration management tools such as Ansible. So that experience comes from our customers, and everybody wants self-service. That's what we hear all the time. What is surprising is every time the follow-up question is, what does that mean to you? And every time we get a slightly different answer, because depending on who they are, what's their experience, for the size of the company, we get very different answers. So originally, when we started the company, our customers tended to be pretty small and or medium-sized, fairly technical. And for example, they would use Terraform modules, and they would have those building blocks that they would assemble, create some Terraform glue code, and that would be it. And they would be very happy with that. As we are getting up market, talking to bigger customers, some of them are starting to push back on that and feeling that they don't want their developers to even see the code. They don't want to have to create the glue code anymore. So that's what we're seeing a lot. And to them, self-service could mean now having a visual editor. So still same building blocks, but engineers do not get to manipulate them directly. They have this visual editor and they just drag things around and they get the result they are expected. Another thing that we are hearing a lot is they just want form. So they don't even want the engineers to see the building blocks. They just want some form. You want web application, you need a load balancer, you need some computing power, and you need some storage. Fine. Tell me which region, tell me how much traffic you're expecting, and behind the scenes, we will just create that for you. You just fill that form, and that's it. That's something we are hearing and seeing a lot from our customers.
Wow, sounds like they're taking a lot of the thinking out of, the inputs so that developers have it as easy as possible to get what they need. Ashish, what about you at Netflix or before? What does developer self-service mean in the context of your organization?
Yeah, so I could start with my experience at AWS. So there, like self-service was mainly the experience I had was mainly around giving you the tools and services to make, application development, deployment as seamless as possible. So making it really easy for you to like use templates, scaffolding and stuff for your applications, being able to like set up a basic app like in a matter of minutes and give you great standards and stuff around monitoring observability. um, from there, like we also had some things I think similar to what was just mentioned around making like up leveling it for people with less technical expertise. So like making it easy for internal teams to build processes around hiring and stuff. Instead of tracking it in spreadsheets, you could also build like applications from it. So that was like slightly different experience. Here at Netflix, I'm leading a team on monitoring and observability that's embedded into an internal developer portal, which is basically our console. So that's a slightly different experience where like once you have your application stuff set up, it's we provide all the observability related self-service around like giving you alert configurations. Some of those are like even managed for you, and self-service dashboarding, things like that, but in the context of a broader full-fledged IDP.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'll follow that question up with anyone who wants to answer this. Was there a specific moment or event that prompted the need of development of self-service within your teams, or was it something that you all approached initially? Like, was self-service always the way that you were going to do it, or was there any one happening that caused you to go the self-service route? Uh, Gal, anything
Yeah,
on your
sure.
side? Yeah.
I think my most relevant experience here was in Cisco, and it wasn't a one event that triggered me to decide, okay, we need self-service. I think it was more of the failure of the non-self-service model, right? Because it wasn't the first thing we tried. Our initial thought was, okay, well, you will build it and they will come. You set up the docs and everyone will follow in line. Reality was it just didn't happen. The platform team, the SRE team, In our case, it started out as an SRE team and migrated into a platform team. They had the documentation, they had the example repositories, they had the rules on how to set up everything, but people just didn't use it. So I think that's where we realized, okay, we need to start making a shift.
Very cool. Jean-Marc, with your experience in customers, especially the upmarket customers wanting to leverage self-service, is there any one reason that they're coming to you, or a need that they're identifying?
Uh, yeah, and that kind of relates to what Gail said. And I have a previous experience when I was on the other side of the fence that's really very, very similar. So often what they want is they have the paved path, but then if the paved path was too prescriptive and did not take feedback into account enough, people would start walking around the paved path. And that's especially true because usually when you're in that situation, you start thinking about self-service, how you can set guardrails, how you can make things a bit more like structured. It means that you're not there. It means that you're coming from a past where a lot of people had access, like elevated access. It was like the Far West. And now that you're trying to get on the paved path, people still have ways to walk around you because they still have those permissions. They can just ignore you if they want. So that's why it's important to onboard them, make sure that they're aligned with what you're trying to build. Because technically, usually they can just walk around you. So you'd better make them happy with the new expectations.
Yeah, exactly. Get the job done so they don't roam around you. Okay, so let's shift gears here a little bit. I want to get into some of the best practices that may you all have from your experience when building developer self-service platforms. And I'd like to start with you, Ashish. Given your experience with the monitoring observability team, what are some of the best practices that you would like to share with our listeners on building platforms?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one thing that is really important is understanding like what is the objective of the self-service platform you're building. That could be like your sub team or the IDP for the entire a company itself. Having that success criteria well defined allows you to like make sure you're optimizing for the right things. It's not always as clear as say like a user facing product or something that you can just track revenue for. You have to like really understand what is important to your organization, what metrics you should track, and then how to even measure those, making sure all of that is set up. So like it could be what's your deployment frequency? It could be like MTTR. And then also you want to make sure that since you're investing in this developer tooling, it's actually getting adopted as well. So that's definitely like an input metric to track. Another thing I'll mention is that not going with an approach that is too rigid. This is kind of a mistake like we've kind of experienced early on in some of the AWS stuff that we built, where things were kind of very much tied to a particular service or solution versus kind of keeping it flexible such that you could have a plugin architecture that allowed you to like if you switch tools at one point or two teams have different needs, it is kind of flexible enough that you can onboard a different experience, but you want to provide an opinionated default experience as well so that people are not overwhelmed using the tool you're supposed to use to simplify your experience overall, right? So I would say like opinionated default stance, but extensible and flexible under the hood. Another thing that I would say is important is making sure you don't try and build everything all at once, because you're going to get a lot of feedback, and initial assumptions may not turn out to be true in the real world. So you want to be able to like ship incrementally, get feedback from developers, make adjustments, and that kind of layers on top of the flexible architecture that I talked about just before this. um, and I think another important part is the security aspect, because like a big portion of say like IDPs is around ownership, understanding who owns what, when people are part of an org or transfer orgs, making sure you correctly handle like access control and stuff like that. So you don't want that to be an afterthought. It's supposed to be like part of your foundational approach. And lastly, I would say this is the thing that people kind of tend to prioritize the least, but is extremely important, which is making sure your documentation and training resources around this developer tooling is really solid. Because at the end of the day, like, if people are going to invest time in using it, they should have all the resources that helps them upskill. So like, great documentation and workshops is something that we've used successfully.
Very nice. So I heard, don't make it rigid, keep it flexible, and just make sure you're empowering folks with education initially. All important things. Gal, anything to add here?
Yeah, so I want to like take one of the points that Ashish talked about and just make it more focal. To me, the best success metrics an IDP can have is basically adoption and retention. Because if you're looking at any SaaS product, let's forget IDPs for example for a second. When you're building a SaaS product, usually the most important metrics to you are adoption and retention, and then you have like specific metrics which impact those metrics. And an IDP is not different. It's a product that you're actually selling within the company, right? And I see some organizations, for example, where the top tier manager, the CTO or the CIO partners with the platform team and says, from now on, everyone must use the IDP and they're not allowed to do anything else. In my opinion, those organizations rob themselves of the best metrics they can have to improve their IDP, right? Because if everyone must use the IDP, then we can't really track adoption, we can't really track retention. And if you try to look back and think of some app that you must use, for example, a government app or something like that, I don't know what it's like in other places. In Israel, it's usually not very good, just because they have no motivation to make it better. And with IDP, it's the same. So, for example, when Ashish talked about documentation or workshops that actually help people get onboarded into the platform, this is all tying up into us trying to get the needle of onboarded users up, of engaged users up, and of retained users up. So I think we as engineers tend to go ahead and build things. We want to build stuff and to build cool stuff. But if we'll get into the product manager one mindset for 1 second, we'll see that we need to start with the metric that we want to move. And this metric is, I want more developers in my company to use the IDP so they'll have, so the develop first there and we'll have a better development experience. Okay, what actions should I take to move this needle? This should be our North Star.
That's awesome. I really like that approach of putting on your product hat, right? We don't oftentimes do that, right? We want to build, but we really have to think about the value that we're creating for the internal developers, and they are the internal customers. So very, very awesome. All right. So this next question is for you, Jean-Marc. I know you have a lot of experience in cloud infrastructure and DevOps. Can you discuss the role of internal developer portals in facilitating self-service?
Yeah, sure. So what I've seen in my personal experience and what I've heard from our customers is that they try to ship things left. They try to empower the application engineers. Because a lot of those companies, they have some kind of platform team, sometimes called DevOps team or SRE team, a team that is responsible for the deployment pipelines, for the deployment platform. But they are facilitators. They're not people actually consuming the platform. And what happens is that they cannot get in the way. They cannot slow everybody down. So they need to balance something here, which is very interesting. And I've been in that position at my previous company, where you have the internal customers, because I agree with Gal, the application engineers are your internal customers, and especially in a lot of contexts, as I said earlier, they usually have some kind of permission that allow them to work around you, even if they are told that they have to use your platform. They usually can just ignore you and walk around you under the radar. So you have to balance that attractiveness. You need to appeal to them, But at the same time, you have the security team banging on your door to make sure that the next report will be better than the previous one, that this piece of infrastructure that was deployed should be put under control because it's not acceptable, because now it's like tons of critical issues in the report, and that's not okay. And as the platform team, you need to balance that. You need to try to find a way to, please both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
Oh, I was just going to follow that up with that's a great answer. And IDPs, as we know, are the portal for enablement, right? One of the more contentious questions that I've come across is ownership of those IDPs. All of you have really touched on the fact that you not only have to create these pathways of self-service, maybe using IDPs, and make it so all of engineers want to use it, right? What happens when it comes to maintenance of these self-service capabilities and IDPs? Who owns it? Who maintains it? And I'd love for all of you to answer that from your perspective. How does that work in your organizations? Ashish, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can give this a stab. So if you're talking about ownership of the IDP, so there would typically be different levels of platform teams that are building things that are integrated into this. So there could be like the console team itself, which houses everything, which is basically the IDP application itself. So you would build out, things around understanding. Um, like let's say the software catalog and ownership related things, security, all of those aspects, the platform itself for being able to add things within the IDP. For example, like let's say you wanted to add things related to observability, which my team handles. That's a platform team as well, but it's kind of being embedded as a plugin into the IDP as a whole. Then similarly, like for delivery, that would be all your CI/CD stuff. For application development, all the templates and stuff, those would be different aspects of the IDP also built as plugins. So I'd say the console team would be one team that owns basically the architecture of the IDP application and making sure it's secure, it's extensible, people can build plugins. How do you build those plugins? That's something that is a self-service model to other platform teams like myself. Then we would build the monitoring and like observability related things for you to track like the health of your applications. Another team would build like delivery, CI/CD related tooling that would embed into the IDP. So they would use the self-service from the IDP itself to kind of have that implemented. But within their own offerings, there would be self-service as well. So, for example, in our case, it would be self-service dashboarding, or like there would be kind of platform teams that are experts in certain aspects of application development that would kind of configure alerts and stuff for you that you as a application developer could view as a self-service model. So I would say like it stacks responsibility in that sense, and there's different layers of ownership. All the way at the top is the application developer themselves that's consuming all of this. So that's how I would view it. But lastly, I'll say like you don't want to have a culture of like, okay, this is not my problem, you own it, because at the end of the day, you're building these tools for developers across the organization, and you do want to have like your org chart kind of represented very clearly in the IDP. So you want to have it collaborative where teams could kind of intersect. I think that could be shared ownership. So I'll just kind of end with that.
Awesome. Yeah. Gal, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I think that's that's the North Star. Like when I look at what I want my IDP to look like, it's probably what Ashish just described. I really want my IDP to look like that, but then I look back at our days at Epsagon, where we were like 10 developers, and we couldn't afford, all those teams building all those different parts of the IDP because we had one team. So I think one of the interesting question is how do you walk this path, right? How do you do the transition from 3 developers who own everything into a couple of teams, what is the right point to say, okay, I need a platform team, I need an IDP, I need someone to take ownership of it. So I think in Heptagon, we actually did it a little bit too late. We were already like 5 teams and we still had the shared model of responsibility around the IDP. And someone told me a really interesting sentence, which is high fences makes good neighbors. Like if you have shared responsibility, usually something bad is going to happen around it. Looking back, I wish we had like a team that is dedicated to the platform and build self-serve capabilities into those other teams. My hunch is that once you go past the 2-3 teams limit, you want to have like a very small team. It can be 2-3 developers who owns this platform and collaborate with the other teams in order to grow it. But this should be their main goal, or at least one of the main goals for this small team. Um, Another thing to consider is, do I need to build and maintain this platform, or as a small company, can I just buy something, right? Because we were a monitoring company, Heptagon, so our customers paid for Heptagon and we took some of the burden of monitoring off them. Can we do the same with the IDP? I think at least for companies that are not enterprises, this could be really beneficial.
Absolutely. Jean-Marc, anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because I was in that position of a previous company, like, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. And I was leading the internal team that was building the platform, the CI/CD platform. And we were building it on top of Jenkins and like adding more glue on top of that. And I remember vividly pitching that platform to my CIO, trying to convince him to let my team build that. And I succeeded and it felt really good. And then we started building the platform. And of course, it was never our main priority. Everything got deprioritized multiple times because we had higher priorities and we had this awesome vision. But a few years later, when I finally left the company, we were not there. We were not where what we had envisioned. We were like maybe halfway through that. And by the time COVID had hit, a lot of people were gone, tribal knowledge was lost. And in retrospective, when I look back now, I think that what I should have pitched that day was not build, but buy. Because let's look at this other scenario. Instead of building, within a week, we can get implemented, we get to the vision, we don't need to wait for months, we don't need to wait for things to be deprioritized and reprioritized again. And also when people leave and when you think about the buzz factor, when somebody can just disappear tomorrow, then you have a vendor you can talk to, you can call somebody. And that happens to us. That happened to me multiple times at Spaceleaf. People, they move on and then somebody else come in. And sometimes I remember earlier this year, this customer says, hey, what is a Spaceleaf? I'm like, okay. And he explains, I just took over the responsibility. Everybody's gone. I know nothing about what you do. What do you do for us? And then once I explained, it was like, okay, walk me through my account and help me make sense of what I own now. And with a vendor, you can do that. Without a vendor, it's for you to figure out. And I was in that position at my previous employer when I spent weeks trying to figure out how to operate what I was now owning, because everybody with the tribal knowledge was gone.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of teams may find themselves, in that situation, especially given the state of the industry, right? It's always good to have someone to call for that, posterity and education on how do we support these systems after we implement them. Awesome. Thank you all for the insights on that question. So this next question are sort of, what are the don'ts of rolling out self-service capabilities? We've talked a lot about, support, how you enable it longer term. But what are some of the common pitfalls that organizations can face when rolling out self-service capabilities, and how can our listeners and attendees avoid them? Gal, let's start with you.
So I want to go back to the question on what is the success metric of this platform. And if the success metrics is onboarded users and retained users, I think the easiest pitfall that we can fall into as engineers is to forget to put on our product hat, right? If we just go ahead and think that we know what is easy what will be easy for our developers, because if I'm a developer, I can build something for myself and it will probably be pretty good, and I can self-serve with it. But we need to remember that we don't necessarily know what will be easy for all the developers to self-serve in our company. It just means that it is easy for me and I understand how to use it, but it doesn't mean that all of the developers in my company know how to use it. So the thing that we must do is put our product hat on. And when I organize um, teams and org charts in general, I try to always match the engineering with the product management, right? I try to have a product management for each team, so he can actually lead the way, and there will be a good symbiosis between the two. In my opinion, if you can afford it, you should have a product platform manager. Like, it doesn't have to be the team leader's responsibility to build the product vision of the IDP. You want someone who is talking to your internal developers, um, talking to what they actually need, and pave the way through this IDP. Of course, it should be someone technical, but he should still have the product manager role. Now, I understand that not every company can afford this, and a lot of times the team leader for the IDP actually, or the team leaders for the IDP actually takes on the responsibility of pointing the way. In this case, I highly suggest that this individual get as a mentor not a very seasoned technical person, because I assume that if he got the role of being the team leader of the IDP, is already very, very, very technical. He should have a mentor from the product management who can actually help him see that he's on the right track to tracking his business goals.
Yeah, I think that that is a great tip. If you don't have, the support like directly from a product perspective, partner with someone who can give you those tools and tricks to really figure out what exactly your developers need, not just once, but on a continuous basis. Very, very cool. Jean-Marc, I know you mentioned like, the pitfall of not having the knowledge to support the IDPs. Any more pitfalls on that you can think of for rolling out developer self-service?
Yeah, what I would like to add kind of relates to what Gail just said about leadership. In my opinion, leadership needs to set expectations, but not be too prescriptive on how to meet them. Because otherwise, the engineers won't be happy. As I said before, they will work around the solution, and they are internal customers, and they need to be treated that way. So that's why I completely agree with the need for some product management person around, helping, keeping that mindset that those engineers are internal customers and they need to be satisfied.
Very cool. Ashish, any
Yeah.
war
I
stories? Yeah.
So I guess I'll start with like following up what Gal said around the success metrics. So I think it's really important to clearly define those success metrics and then also follow up by tracking them regularly. Because what happens is people will say, adoption, retention, and also like other metrics like MTDR or like deployment frequency, but then there won't be like great ways to track this, and they won't invest the time maybe in like making sure these are measurable. And once they are measurable, like measuring them consistently and taking action to drive them up, I think that will enable like iterative progress in the right direction. The second thing is like I think for a lot of people, the outcome of self-service is like improving developer productivity. But sometimes that would mean heavy investment in developer experience, but it's hard to see the immediate return on investment there. So by not investing enough in developer experience, what will end up happening is developers may not actually become more productive because you've now handed them something that a central team would have handled and said, you can do it yourself, you should be more productive, but it's built in a way that is actually constraining them. So now they're like left on their own and less productive. So it's kind of achieved the opposite goal. So that's a big risk in my opinion. So investing in developer experience is super important. And that includes like continuously like maintaining things, doing like surveys and stuff to get qualitative feedback as well. Lastly, I would say there should be some like level of personalization and actionable insights as part of the portal. Like if I come to the portal as a manager, what I see should be like, oh, okay, I have to drive this migration to completion by this date, or this other metric is not trending where I needed to be. Like that would be helpful for me. For a developer, like in the scope of an application that they own, they would get more actionable insights around, like, maybe the health of that application, or like, something they need to do to drive some particular outcome. Or like it could be even, for example, like some Jira tickets that they have that are due at some point, coming up to them as like, okay, these are the things you need to action on. So like having a homepage or something where it's like, okay, I want to come here, I want to find out what I can do to drive uh, you know some outcome, and like getting productivity gains out of that. So like I think some level of personalization also helps.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome. So we've covered a lot today, and many of the answers that you all gave on ownership of self-service, the best practices, have a lot to do with the specific organizational culture. So my final question for all of you is, what role does culture play in adoption, which we have identified to be one of the big metrics, right, that we want to drive when rolling out IDPs and self-service? And how can leaders foster a culture that supports and enhances those self-service capabilities? Jean-Marc, over to you first.
Yeah, so I think you need a culture of experimentation with feedback loop. You need the leadership to set a direction, and you need to team to start small, to learn and iterate. The goal here is to build trust over time, because when you start and you announce that big project, there will be people that will be like, yes, Sabine, I want to be your beta tester. And some people will be like, no way, I'm not changing anything. And eventually you need all those people on board. So what I would recommend is to start with the motivated one, the one that raises their hands, the ones that will just help you, that will just adopt your tool because it's out there, that will share feedback with you and make it better. And over time, try to identify people that are slightly less early adopters, but still pretty open-minded. And leave the people that push back originally last. And then show them the value, show that the other teams have like an easier time using your platform than what they do today. And eventually they should be sold by the time it's their turn to move. They should be like, okay, it's not as bad as we thought originally, because now we're seeing the value. We're seeing other people being successful in using the platform.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gal, do you have anything to add on culture, best practices?
Yeah, I think maybe it's less about culture and more about leaders,
Okay.
because like what I'll say, of course, culture has a big role in it. But what comes to my mind is, if I look back to what I said, one of the things I said is companies where the CTO or the CIO says you must use the platform robs themselves of the value. This is one end of the spectrum. The other end is the leader just don't care, right? The leader can say, yeah, there's a platform team, it's their responsibilities. My responsibility is to drive the business forward. If they succeed, good luck. If not, too bad. But I need to drive the business forward. This is also a bad end of the spectrum to be at, because you need this executive support and push in order to make such moves, which are usually relatively big, even if you start small, successful, right? So you want to be somewhere in the middle. You don't want to mandate the usage, but on the other hand, you want to advocate for it. You kind of want to be the salesperson for the self-serve platform. For example, when some of the engineers talk to you about an issue that they had, if you see an opportunity where they could have used the platform in order to make their life easier, you should ask them, why haven't you used the platform? A, it will give you feedback that you can then convey to the platform leader. And B, if they just haven't thought of it, it will be in their mind the next time. And they've also heard someone who they look up to tell them that the platform is good, so they're more likely to think that the platform is good and they're more likely to use it. So we have an important role as leaders to push this initiative that we believe in forward, but not in a mandating way, but in a setting an example way.
That's awesome. Ashish?
Yeah, for me, like there are some key points here. Like definitely what Jean-Marc said about the experimentation culture. Like it's not something that's called out explicitly in organizations, but like being open to trying things, both as the platform developer and the end user, is really important, because you need to, like I said earlier on in the best practices, like be able to iteratively try things, and that means you're going to get things wrong. You have to change things, so you have to be open to experimentation when building stuff. Be open to it failing. Be open to getting negative feedback. So the next point would be like having a culture of being really open to feedback and explicitly asking for feedback. So that's something that's well represented in Netflix's culture, but something many other companies care about as well is like customer focus, and making sure you understand like what you've built, is it meeting their needs or not. Like separate from the business metrics, what are people feeling about having to use this tool, right? Like as Gal mentioned, like it should not be something that is forced upon people. So I'd say the last point there is then about like freedom. So you want to offer developers the productivity gains through an IDP or different types of tooling, but you don't want to make it the only option. Then if people are adopting this out of their own choice, you know that what you've built is actually leading to improved productivity and driving like those metrics that you care about, versus like you've cut off all the other options. So now, like, of course, adoption will go up. So I think freedom is essential in that case as well.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jean-Marc, you have a follow-up to this?
Yeah. And of course, it's escaping me right now. No, yeah. So, yeah, a couple things. So, I think it's really important. It's escaping me again. Okay, forget about it.
That's
Just
okay.
brain
That's
fart.
okay.
Sorry
I
about it.
actually had something. That's okay. I actually had something to add for this one. On like the leadership, and the approach that they should bring to this is one thing that I've seen in just successful organizations that have rolled out driven adoption, and I like what Ashish said, like by way of freedom and not force. Has been the leadership, looks at self-service and shifting left as like a business, value, right? They look at it as speeding up the delivery of whatever their business product is, right? When you enable this capability, and when they incorporate self-service and IDPs within the frame of that, they prioritize it, right, and fund it, which is also very important when it comes to maintaining these capabilities internally. So just wanted to share that. And yeah, so I see that we have a few questions in the Q&A. I'm going to start with this first question. So this question is from anonymous attendee, and it says, a lot of IDPs allow self-service, but they don't seem to handle the typical workflow of promoting through environments. For example, dev to stage to prod. We are at the pre-planning stages for our IDP and are trying to decide on how to still have teams rely on infrastructure as code tools like Terraform and avoid the devs relying on ClickOps. Are others thinking this? So I think this is more so of how do we handle an IDP promotion through workflow and environments without relying on infrastructure as code.
So
Yeah.
I think we need to let's define some terms here, and then let's see if this question makes sense. So first, like DevOps, SRE platform, all went through an evolution, right? We started out with the concept of dev and ops, where we had the developers do the development, throwing something over the fence, ops taking it, pushing it to production. Then we had DevOps saying, okay, this one team can do both things. It can write the code, push it to production, and own it. In parallel to DevOps, Intel and Google came up with something completely different. They talk about the SRE model, where one team builds the code, one team owns it in production, but they communicate effectively, and there are a lot of methodologies and metrics that make sure that this doesn't lead to the throwing over the fence mechanism. And now, when we're talking about platform engineering and IDPs, we're talking about a team that is giving an internal product, an IDP, that helps other teams, accompanies accomplish some of their goals, right? It can be developing code. It can be promoting from dev to stage to prod using CI/CD pipelines. It can be monitoring and alerting. It can be a lot of things. So when we're talking about IDP giving the capability to self-service, it can give a lot of self-service capabilities. One of them is promoting the environment. Now, the way that an IDP can do it, for example, is to, when it's let you self-serve into a new project, create a new project, it can build a CI/CD pipeline automatically that suits the need for this specific project. So if it's a Python project that is publishing a library, it can automatically come prepackaged with a right workflow where when you merge one branch, it goes to dev, one branch, it goes to staging. Or if, for example, if it's a node project that should be deployed into ECS using CDK as an IAC, then it should come with the GitHub action that triggers on the correct terms when to deploy this CDK stack or when to sync to Argo or whatever infrastructure you're actually choosing to use. But the IDP is like a more high-level concept, and you need to use it to implement what is right for your company.
Right. Very good. Ashish or John Mark, anything to add to that? No? Okay.
Yep.
Alrighty. Well,
yeah.
go ahead. Okay. All right. We will actually address those last two questions in Slack. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up. So to the attendees, we hope this discussion has provided valuable insights into the power of developer self-service and how it can empower engineers to get things done. To our panelists, Ashish, John Mark, and Gal, thank you so much for all of the great insights in today's panel. We'll all be heading now over to the Lead Dev Slack in the technical strategy channel. So please head there to continue the discussion. Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you next time.